Okay, thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to run through our P6-QA tool. And this tool was built several years ago. We used it for ourselves when we were running schedule analysis for our clients. And then we said, it's crazy to not allow our clients to have this tool. Let's let them have it. They can self-critique, and then only if they need a little bit more deeper dive on the quality of the schedule, then they could bring us in. So that's really where this tool started. So I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm joining you today from Calgary, and I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald. And I'm going to run through the software in detail with you. So let's touch on why we need this tool. Well, building a schedule is part science, part art, I would say. So why we need this tool is to give the people putting the schedule together or critiquing the schedule, so they might be receiving a schedule from an outside party, maybe an engineering company or a construction company. It could be a subcontractor doing a particular scope of work. Give them a way to quickly look at a schedule, get some ideas on how well it's put together and where the problem areas are. That's really a very common struggle that we all have when we're dealing with big projects and big schedules. So the other day I had a call from an old client that I've worked with for many years, needing to critique a 9,000 activity schedule. So again, having a tool that gives you a launch off point is really important. So let me just start with a quick question, a quick poll. And we share these polls on our website, and we share them once a year in an email blast that we do. Do you receive schedules from third parties? And yes or no, to adhere to certain business practices. So this is pretty common that you have that kind of criteria. It depends on your role, of course. If you're a contractor, you're not usually receiving so much. You're preparing the schedules and you're trying to follow the business practices required by the client. So it does depend, of course, on your role. So it's a bit of a 50-50 split on the people who want it to respond. So what makes a schedule good or not good, right? That's always a bit of a hot debate, always interesting to debate different scheduling techniques. You're looking for some standards. We want some standards. So there are standards out there in the marketplace. There are different standards. ACE, PMI, they have standards. We've got the DCMA standards. There's many of them out there. And our tool does marry up and support many of them. And I'll show you that in a second. Now then, quality varies on experience, and different experiences make you expect certain things in a schedule, okay? So quality is a little bit of, again, part science, part art, once again. So when it comes to trying to understand what's in a schedule, we're trying to get a schedule that's reliable. It's consistent, that the team can actually work to, okay? If we overlap all the activities in a building where you're trying to put up walls, electrical, plumbing, and you're all trying to do it in one area, obviously that's not going to work. It's not workable. So we're trying to understand whether the work has been put together in a way that's actually workable. We're trying to understand whether there's any bottlenecks in the schedule, pinch points that need to be addressed. And you can see that with some of these kind of analysis points. We're also trying to see whether it's well thought out, right? If you have a big project and you only have 10 activities on a 10-year project, there's probably some room for error because they haven't thought through enough of the detail. So I happen to be big into gardening. My name is actually means garden, but I'm big into gardening. You have to organize what you're going to plant where, when. It's the same thing. You need to think about it. You need to plan it. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the summer comes and goes and you don't get your garden in. So it's the same thing when we're dealing with construction. So we need to understand where these bottlenecks may occur, and we have to make sure we're following some business processes. Okay, so several of our clients that are on the engineering owner side, they have certain things that they've mandated in their specifications as to what is needed in the schedule. Okay, so durations of activities, they can't be more than 30 days long, for example, is a very common type of specification, because we're trying to keep the activities where you can get them updated within 1 to 2 cycles, 3 cycles at most, for not every activity, but the bulk of them. Okay, so there has to be a little bit of wiggle room. So there are things that you have to follow. Okay, so we have some clients that use the primary resource flag as a key indicator for a bunch of reporting. So that's one that we want to monitor. Okay, and there's no easy way to monitor that, but QA will do that for you. Okay, so there are not only quality metrics, but also business process metrics that you want to follow. And not everyone's going to have the same experience level. And what we want to do is not have to always go to a third-party vendor like ourselves to come in and critique your schedule. Because first of all, we are not familiar with your project. So we have to get familiar with your project. Then we have to critique the schedule. It can be expensive. So we want to empower our clients to be able to do more of that, and then use a third-party cold eyes review when it makes sense. Okay. And that empowers the team, puts more onus and more responsibility on the team, and also just makes your schedule much better. Okay, so those are really some of the benefits that we've found with using P6-QA. Now, the other thing that we find very frequently is, even if you're not using a third party to critique the schedule, you're usually using your senior team to critique the schedule. And they're often very, very busy. And if you've got a lot of projects in your portfolio, they don't necessarily have time. So again, we're trying to empower the whole team to be able to do a better job at critiquing schedules, as well as putting them together in a better manner, a more consistent manner. So let me ask one more quick question. If you do look at schedules and critique them, how do you do it? Do you do it manually? So when we first started this many years ago, we used to use Excel spreadsheets and do statistics. So we got away from that, of course, with the QA tool. Do you get outside contractors? Do you have some sort of third-party tool? You don't check them? Yeah, so it's going to be a mixed bag, of course, depending, again, on your situation. And we're seeing sort of a bit of a variety, which is pretty much expected. Okay, so hopefully in the next few minutes, as I run through the tool, you'll see something that could be helpful for your team. Do a better job on putting the schedules together. So how it works. So I'm going to show you the tool live in a minute. What you're going to see is we critique a variety of things. Now, the basic things for the schedule, because when you schedule your project, when you hit F9, it does the forward and backward pass. So it's using logic. So we're looking at the logic ties. Do we have logic missing? What kind of logic ties have we chosen? Do we have a bunch of leads and lags? And it's looking at durations. Okay, so that's the fundamental pieces, building blocks to the F9 calculation. So we've got to critique those. Now, in doing that, we look at constraints. So we're going to show you whether there's constraints. Are they hard constraints or soft constraints? And those would be a mandatory versus start on or before type of constraint. What kind of constraint has been used in the schedule? As well as going a little deeper into the resourcing side. Okay, so we want to look at that, of course. Do you use resources? Do you use roles? How to use primary resources? Those sorts of things. And then as the project starts to progress, we want to analyze the updating that's been put in. Is it clean? Is it consistent? Have we started activities that have resources, but zero resources have been actualized? That's definitely a flag that something may be incorrect in the update. So as I mentioned a little bit ago, we do follow many of the industry standards with the validations that we've already built. And we've got tons of validations. So when you get P6-QA, you don't have to use all of them. So we usually deploy all of them. The team looks at the ones that are there, and then they decide which ones they want to carry on with. And that's how it works. And then the way that we sell the package, it's by the number of validations and the number of projects and activities, okay? So if you're a smaller user, you could still use QA. It's a smaller price tag. If you're a large organization with many, many schedulers using it, many, many projects, it's a bigger price tag, but it still usually averages out to less than $50 a month per project, and usually quite a bit less. Okay, so to me, it's very well worthwhile in terms of the price point. So not only are we validating activities, resources, we validate expenses, we can validate steps, we can validate level data, WBS level data. So we can validate data in P6 at all the different levels. And the validations do not have to be identical on each project. So they are controlled by the users. And so that gives you a lot of flexibility, because the level of detail that you might need on a long range plan and different types of projects, so a capital project versus an operational project or a shutdown turnaround outage project, they will need to be different. So we've given you that flexibility, and I will show you that. And then, as I mentioned, the long range plan, 10-year long plan versus an IT project, they will be different. Okay, so we've given you that flexibility. And the types of checks are across many different elements, as I mentioned. So we've got calendar checks, we've got statistical checks, logic, detail, etc. So I will show you that in detail here. So the way that it works is you put in your criteria and then you run the analysis. Of course, the idea is then to fix any anomalies, any problems, work with your contractors if that is the right way to go about it, to highlight the problems and have them fix it and then re-critique it. So that's the way it would work. And then once you've rerun your analysis, what many of our clients do is they have our P6 Reporter tool as well. They make a snapshot and then they report out to their corporate reporting tool. And then they've got different BI publishing capability. I'm going to show you Power BI. And you can see in detail what the analysis looks like. You can also output reports this is a amalgamation report in a Word file. Okay, so there's many different ways to get the reporting out depending on what you need. And then you can, of course, look at the trending. And I'll show you some of that in the Power BI in a minute, because you want to make sure that the trending is going in a good direction. And you want to be critiquing regularly. So usually on every update, because with updates, things can change. You may add activities, you may remove activities, you may rework logic, etc. So you do want to be critiquing regularly, not just because you needed it for a gate in your project plan, okay, that you had to do it. So you want to be running it regularly. Okay, so let me go ahead and jump into sharing P6. me just do this. Just a second here. Let me make sure. Okay, there we go. That should do it. And just let me know if it looks like it's a okay size. All right, so today I'm going to use P6 in the client to show you this, but this does work in the web as well. So if you're using P6 web, everything that I'm going to show you in the client is also available in P6 web. Okay, so this is what it would look like in P6 web. Most of our clients still use P6 client, so that's what I'm going to use today for the presentation. So let me give you the lay of the land as to what you're seeing here on the screen. So I've got multiple projects, and I've got an EPS structure, and I've got this grouped by project manager, just for this particular layout. And then what we're seeing is against each project, we have our different validations. So the validations come in sort of three formats. We have the visual validation. So you can see we've got some stop signs, we've got some check marks, we've got some yield signs. So those are the visual validations. And then we have the metric. Okay. And we have the metric giving us a statistic in this case. So this is giving us a count of how many had a high duration. So how many activities hit what we call the high duration range. Now I'll show you how you control the range in a minute. So this is giving us both a visual as well as a statistical count because we're at the project level. So it's counting activities that were in that boat. Now, not only do we count them and visually flag them, but we also give you a report, okay, that you can copy and paste out into an email, into a Word document, into a PowerPoint, whatever format you want that to go out to. So we create those in notebooks. So in this case, let me go to the schedule validation, which matches what I've got here. SQ is a schedule quality. So it's a schedule validation. That's just our nomenclature. And this is the summary that goes along with it. So if we're looking for long duration activities, we have that number there. If we're looking for activities missing predecessors and successors, we've got that here in the notebook. So it's telling us that we had 32 activities that it monitored for that. So we don't monitor activities that are finished, for example, because the predecessors and successors are irrelevant at that point. So that's why you're seeing different numbers of activities being monitored. And then we can see how many actually fit the bill. So in this case, we had 8, and you're seeing that 8 statistic up there as well. Okay, so we've given you different ways to grab the data and use the data depending on how you'd like to use it. So I will show you some of these going out into Power BI as well. So let's take a look at a few of the others. I'll scroll over just so you could get the idea. So we're looking at missing logic, which we can see here. So we're in the red, meaning we're not meeting our quality metric. And the target is right here. So in this case, we have 0 tolerance. So if an activity is missing a predecessor or a successor, it gets flagged. And we have no tolerance on it. So this one, though, we do have a tolerance. So we're saying if remaining activities and milestones are missing a predecessor or successor, flag it. And in this case, we're saying that we can have up to 5% of the activities missing that, which would be a green. Okay, and that's what you're seeing in this next one. All right, so that's how this is reporting back to you. And again, we've got the flags as well. Now, we usually just take advantage of base P6 workings, inner workings. So we're just using layouts here to navigate through the different quality metrics. So along with the indicators, we have the criteria, the setup. So this is where I set up the projects and the different quality metrics. So what I'm trying to show you here is they don't have to be the same. So this particular project, I'm saying 10% of the activities could have a high float, whereas this is saying 2% or less is what we're targeting. So what that would imply to me is that these projects are further along on their development cycle, in which case I would want a more strict standard. Okay, so we've got a question put in. Are the target metrics based on industry standards as per AAC or PMI, for example? Yes, absolutely. When you get the tool, we've got some base standards in there. And yes, we have different criteria that AAC uses versus PMI. And we've got all of those in the system. And then you can pick and choose which ones you want to use. So yes, they are set up per those standards, but you can then modify them as appropriate. So, what constitutes a long lag? What constitutes a long lead? Again, those are standards out there, and then you can deviate from them as you wish. Okay. So in this case, a long lead, a long lag, and a lag is I have a start to start perhaps, and I've said 8 hours. Everything's in hours in P6. You need to put them in hours. 8 hours or more is a long lag. Now that would be very appropriate in a turnaround situation. May not be as appropriate in a capital project that's five years long. That's where you might want to put that up to 40 hours, which would be 1 work week, or even a longer one, 352 hours, which I think is 1 month. Okay, so you have control over that, and you can follow the standards or you can deviate from them as appropriate. Okay, some of the standards, for example, may not be specifically laid out for a turnaround project, or they may not be specifically laid out for. We have one client that has a 100-year-long project. Okay, so you may need to modify those as appropriate. So this is where you set up your different criteria. So very easy. You can use fill downs on these layouts. So you can set up your criteria quite quickly. And then those criteria are what we use to do the monitoring. Now, not only do we monitor schedule quality, we can also monitor what we call business process quality. Okay, so this is where it becomes pretty interesting because we can get very specific to how you use P6. So we can add different metrics quite quickly. Okay, so when we do sell P6-QA, we do include some consulting to help the team set up the tool and potentially create additional metrics. So we've done that with many clients. So we have already a good pool of metrics to pull from to kickstart you, but there are often specifics that a client wants to monitor. So let me give you a few food for thought ideas. So some of our clients monitor the activity ID format. Okay, so they put in a specific format that the activity has to follow. So it could be some digits, some numbers, some characters, some dashes, etc. So you can put in the format and it'll validate against it. We might have an activity naming convention that we want to follow. So we want to make sure no activities have the exact same name. And that is a very good metric, and it is often in the standards out there in the marketplace. So we can monitor that. Now then we can go further. We can go further on the way activity types are set up. So don't use certain activity types. So fixed duration and units, maybe what your team wants to use. And we're monitoring whether that's used across the board. Okay. We also added the capability of flagging codes as mandatory. Okay, so that's something that's not in P6, but many of our clients would love to see. So we've built it into QA. And they're mandatory because they're reporting on them. When you're reporting out to management, you want to make sure all codes that are needed are in there. Okay, so again, we've built in a lot of additional capability in terms of what we're monitoring. Okay, so we mentioned primary resource. So this is flagging that the primary resource is missing in some cases. Cost accounts, if you use them, you can monitor them. Expenses, steps, etc. Okay, so I'll show you some of those in a deep dive into a project. Let me just see if I missed anything. So on the note of some standards, I mentioned we already have many of them in there. So you can see we've got notebooks for some of the different standards out in the marketplace, the DCMA, the GAO, the Naval. I think we've built the AAC and PMI. They're just not particularly in here. So if those are the ones that you prefer to use, very easy to get a notebook set up for that. Okay, so let's actually go to the next level. Let's actually go and look at the project, and let's actually see where these have been put together, okay? And I'm gonna just click over to this. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into the project in a sec. I'm just gonna show you how easy it is to invoke the P6-QA. So you don't have to have every single one of your projects being analyzed. You can pick and choose, and you can also pick and choose the frequency at which they run. Sorry, I think I moved to the wrong layout. Let me go to this one, I think. Yes, this one will be better. So you can pick and choose whether or not a project should be analyzed, yes or no. And you can pick and choose how and how often you would like it to be analyzed. So you can see here, oops, let me close that. You can see here that we have some different choices. So we have most of our clients run it manually, but some of them run them regularly on a certain frequency because they know when their updates are supposed to be done. So for example, with our P6 calculator, you can automate the scheduling, and maybe your team has to have all their updates in Monday morning. So scheduling can be automated every Monday evening so that data warehousing with P6 Reporter can be run in the night every Monday evening, which creates dashboards automatically available for people Tuesday morning. Okay, so that could be your business process. In which case, having the QA run every week on the Monday frequency would make a lot of sense. Okay, so we've got different ways that our clients run this automatically. Okay, and we can also run it manually, as you see here. So I just run it manually, and off you go. So you have a variety of different ways on how you want to run it. So I've opened this project, so let me jump into a project so we can actually see what it starts to look like in the details at the activity level. So we have different layouts, again, that we just take advantage of. So we're trying to make it feel very comfortable for the P6 users, okay? So everyone knows how to make layouts, and we're just taking advantage of that same functionality. So you can use the layouts that we provide, or you can build your own, mix and match. It's perfectly fine. So this particular layout is schedule quality on logic. So it's letting you know whether any logic is missing. Okay, so we can see that some have a red, I don't know why my layout does that, has some red stop signs. So it's letting you know that logic is missing. Now, stop sign is because not only are we missing the predecessor, it's also missing a successor. So it's got both ends open. So if I go to the relationships tab, we're seeing that, yes, both ends are indeed open. So this is a dangling activity, which implies it could be an activity that's important. It should be part of the critical path, but we've missed it. Okay. So we want to find those and we want to clean them up. Now up here, you can see that we've got just a successor missing or just a predecessor missing. So those show as yield signs. Now, some of these, though, are perhaps the very, very beginning of the project. So you might actually be okay with it having an open predecessor. So what we do there is we use the little blue star to say we've looked at this, and although, yes, it's missing, we're okay with it missing. So it allows you to do an override in that scenario, okay? And if this is essentially your first milestone for the whole project, it may make sense to use that functionality, okay? So that's how that works. And because of that, this would now start to clear up some of these yield signs. So when I was showing you the metric, let me just go on the project here a minute ago. So when we were looking at these two fields here with actual versus remaining, so this is why you might have a difference between these, because we might have 3 overrides in this scenario. So it's letting you know that we have some overrides in here when we have a difference between those 2 criteria. Okay, so a lot of nice flexibility for you to interject what you wish in here. And you can put a note. You can use the regular notebooks in here, and you can put in a note about why you did the override. Okay, so you can use basic P6 functionality to document these things that you're doing in the QA as well. So this one is all about logic, leads and lags, and we can have multiple layouts for you to take a look at different criteria, okay? So we can have another layout. It's just because there's a lot of fields to critique that looks at durations and float, okay? So again, some of these activities may be level of effort activities, and the durations being long may be perfectly acceptable because they are level of efforts. They're not the base task that you want to monitor. So again, we've used the override in that case. So it doesn't count these. Okay, so again, lots of nice override and controls for you as the person running this. But we can see that we do have activities with a lot of high float. Well, it's not that surprising because these are the same activities that were missing the logic, which means they're just floating around the whole project. Okay, so we really need to tidy up the logic in those situations to also have an influence on the high float. Okay, we can see some of these have constraints. Whoops, it's just something weird with my layout. So this has a constraint on it, and it's a soft constraint. Now we might have some with hard constraints that we're going to look through. Okay, so in this particular project, we only have some soft constraints. So we can look at those and we can go and say whether we're okay with those or not. If we are, again, we can use the override here to say that we've looked at it, we've made a note on it, we're comfortable with it being a constraint. Okay, so it gives you the override capability. We also look at the lags, etc. in here. So same thing. And we've got the lag value here. And we're showing the variance. So this is the variance off of what we've deemed acceptable. So if we have a lag that's 200 hours and we said that a lag can be up to 40 hours, this is showing a variance of the lag of 160 off of the quality metric. Okay, so those can be reported on, they can be graphed on. So lots of good capability of looking at the different metrics out in different engines like a Power BI. Now we use our P6 reporter to do that. So again, many of our clients have both of these two tools. They work very well together, and I'll show you some of those reports in a minute. Okay, now let me just go back to that previous layout, and let me go ahead and clean up a bit of that logic, and then I'll run the QA tool and you'll see it in action. Okay, so these were the ones that were missing some logic right here. So they're all missing logic. So it might be a new work package that I've added into the system. And just for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and use the link activity to get some logic on there. Okay, so a link does a finish to start as the first logic tie. I will go ahead and reschedule this. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll jump back and run the QA on it, and you should see some cleanup on here. So this is the civil fabrication work package, and we can rerun the QA on it. Oops, sorry. So the way I rerun it is I clear out the last run date, and it's set to manual and it's set to yes. So I can go ahead and rerun it, and it'll just take it'll take a little bit of time, not much. It's a very small project, and the first time you run this, it takes a bit more time because it's got more to run through. Okay, so you see that it's finished. It lets me know the last day I ran it on, so I've got that metric. And then when I go into my activities, I should see a cleanup on some of these. Yeah, so you see these have been cleaned up right here. And of course, the second one, because I did a link, it got a predecessor, successor. The first one didn't get a predecessor, and the last one did get a successor. So I'd need to keep working on those. Now, quite likely that also influenced my high float, but not necessarily. Okay, so you can see here it's still got a high float. So I'd need to keep working on analyzing that high float situation. And so you work at it bit by bit, and the tool helps visually keep you on track. Now, let's look at some other criteria. So depending on your team, you may or may not be using resources. Okay, most of our clients use resources. Everyone uses it for scheduling. Most of our clients use it for resourcing. Some use it for costing. That's sort of the scenario that we see. So we can look at additional items, and we can do a deeper dive into the resourcing. So for example, when you're using resourcing, I mentioned the primary resource is one that many of our clients use. Now, the primary resource is used mostly for team member, and the primary resource in team member is the one who gets to update the activity, the start and finish. But many of our clients use it for reporting. So what this is telling me with this primary resource flag is that the primary resource was not checked. Okay, so that's what it's looking at. It's looking here, there's no check mark, so it's flagging it for me here. So it's very easy for me to find them. I can just sort on this and I can clean them up very quickly. Okay, I can sort on the no role. So if I use resources and I want to make sure I use a role as well, because lots of our clients report on a summarized view using roles, this gives it to me, okay? If I'm using cost accounts, again, I can just sort by cost account and I can clean up all of the problems, okay? You can also do this in the resource assignment window. So you can mix and match as appropriate. If you use expenses, oops, let me go to the bottom. Here we go. If you use expenses, you should use a category, okay? You should use a cost account. So it's letting me know that these two fields are empty and I should fill them in, okay? So very, very fast, handy to flag where you've got gaps in your business processes. So right away, what I would do is I fix those up, right? So I fill in my cost expense, and this is mobilization. So not sure which one would be appropriate. Let's see. Here we go. We got a mob demob expense category, and we should add the cost account in there. So this would probably be construction, and it could be any one of these, but I'll go ahead and tag it as earthworks subcontractor. So I've done the cleanup, I rerun the QA, and these are going to clean itself up. Okay, so that's why some of our clients automate it. They let it run every single day. So every day I've got a quality metric that's updated. Okay, so that's going into some specifics for your business. And then what you want to do is you want to go deeper, and you want to start looking at the updates. Okay, so I think I've got a project that's a bit better for some updating, and that we can highlight it. So I'll go ahead and open that one up. And I'll flip to my updating layout. So I've got an updating layout that's already monitoring a variety of things. So of course, what you want to monitor is your dates, your start dates, your finish dates, your remaining duration versus your original. And you can see here we're flagging whether the remaining duration is getting longer than the original. Okay, so again, it's flagging it automatically. We want to look at whether our actual dates are making sense, the dates that we're putting in. So usually your actual date should be earlier than your data date. Okay, so let's say my data date, let's just see what my data date is on this project. So it's an old data date. It's 15th of May, 2020. So you wouldn't want an actual finish, an actual start after that typically, okay? So you want those flagged because you may just have a data entry mistake. So that's what that one would look at, and it would flag it for you, okay? So in this case, I've got an actual start after my data date. So that's probably a data entry mistake, so it's flagging it for you. Same thing on the monitoring of resources, okay? So we monitor other things on resources. So we want to monitor whether or not we're going over budget. So we can see here that our actual cost is higher than our baseline cost. So this is flagging it for you, okay? That you should be looking at this, okay? It's a warning, of course. That could mean that that activity is going off the rails. So you want to look at that. Now we also want to look at whether an activity was set to start it. So we've got an actual start, so you can see it here, but I have not any actuals on my resources. So that could be telling me that someone forgot to get the actual hours in, okay? So it's a gap in our updating that we want to look at, and we want to double check, because our reporting is going to potentially be flawed, right? We could be reporting that we're ahead of our resource usage when that could be completely incorrect because we've missed an update. Okay, so that's what you want to take a look at and flag that. Okay, so our flagging is very broad. It goes across all the different aspects, expenses, steps. If you use steps for your updating, you want to make sure you're monitoring that. Okay. So as I said, we have many, many different metrics, very, very elaborate. You don't have to use all of them. You get to pick and choose the ones you want to use. And we've got a lot of really interesting ones that you can run. So I'm just going to show you one additional analysis that we did for a particular client. So this just gives you, again, some food for thought, depending on where you want to go. So we had a client that wanted to monitor the different types of calendars that were being used. I'll go ahead and give full screen to this. And they wanted to monitor whether all the calendars were the same or whether we had differences in the calendars. Okay, so you can see here that we're monitoring, in this case, it's a small project. We're monitoring every activity. We're letting you know the calendar that's being used and the hours of the day. So we're seeing some strange differences here with work days being empty. So no work on Tuesday, Thursday. And then we're flagging whether we've got mismatches. Okay, so this is the types of things that we're able to do with our different technology. So we can get very granular in the way that we monitor a variety of things. And this is just an example, a detailed example with calendars. Okay, now, how do you get the broader team to be able to see and work with the P6 team on the QA items? So what we built for our clients is we're using our P6 reporter tool in conjunction with our P6-QA to give them the capability of looking at all this data in a simplified dashboard. Okay, so in this example, we're using Power BI, but you can push it out to whatever your corporate reporting standard is. So if you're using business objects or SAP dashboarding or Tableau, etc., you can use the P6-QA in conjunction with Reporter and push it out. Okay, so this gives us a very nice way of looking at the data. Okay, and one of the ones that I really like is this activity validation summary. So it really gives you a good feeling very quickly on the order of magnitude of the problem. Okay, so we can see here that in this particular project that we're missing a lot of logic. We can see 55 of them are in red, which means we're completely failing, missing a predecessor and a successor. 11 are missing one or the other, and only 31 are in good shape, either in good shape or they're not eligible. And not eligible would be an activity that's finished. So we don't count that in the statistic, okay? So this gives you a much better idea of the order of magnitude, these sort of dashboards. Now, because we use snapshotting technology in our P6 reporter, we can go look at the different months. Okay, now this one's not changing, so it's not very interesting, but you can go look at different windows, different periods of time. Let's go to, you might need to help me, James. I want to go see the detailed snapshots. I think it might be it. Okay, so here's some additional ways to look at the data. So this is one project, and we could do a time-based graphic. So again, this one's not, okay, here's something that's changing. So this is the sort of thing that is showing you whether it's getting better or worse over time. So a graph like this can be very handy to give you some ideas. So here's another one that's changing over time. Okay, so this is demo data. It's not maybe as representative as your real project would look like. Okay, so this is another way for you to see it. And that's a good one. I'm looking for the portfolio. Okay, I'm blind. This is the one I thought was really, really handy. So this one is a portfolio view, and it's showing you the different snapshots. So in February, what were we looking like versus July? Okay, so you can see whether we're doing better or worse in a visual like this. So this is very handy. It's looking at a portfolio of projects. So in this case, we're seeing that some of our items are getting worse. And in this case, some of our items are getting better. So you're trying to get all green, of course. And this gives you a really nice summary for your management to be able to consume. And you've got filtering capabilities on here. So I don't need to use all the projects. I might just choose one project. And maybe you just want a handful of projects. Okay, so this is base sort of functionality out in a dashboarding tool that makes using these very, very easy. And we have some of the different metrics already built. Okay, so it's helpful to push it out into a dashboard and look at the different ways that you want to report on. So we've got a bunch of these already built. And then one of the things that's interesting is if you start to do some counts. Okay, so again, these are not maybe that exciting because it's demo data, but we want to actually have an idea of where these problems exist. So where are the activities with long durations? Are they at the beginning of the project or are they more at the back end? Now, the reason this is really important is if most of the long duration activities are on the back end, you need to be very wary of the level of detail that has been thought through on your project. Because as we all know, as a project runs, you may need to overlap more and more of the activities at the back end to get the work completed if you run into any delays. So if you have a lot of long activities at the back end, you're likely going to have to start breaking those up to get your sequencing going. Okay, so this is a very big red flag that I would use in analyzing the quality of that. Okay, so we need some statistics on where are these problems. So not only how many problems do we have, but where in the schedule are they? So how many activities have a lot of predecessors, a lot of successors, a lot of float? So we're counting those because that's going to be important as well for the quality. So statistics are one thing, but when those statistics are occurring, hugely important, hugely valuable. Okay, so you want to have these and to get a better idea of whether we've got big problems or not. Okay, so that's another good metric to use. And again, we can pick the project we want to run those on and which snapshot we want to run those on. Okay, so lots of good flexibility here, putting the data out into a dashboarding tool that your team can use to so that it's not just in the P6 space. Okay, so I think I've given you a pretty good overview. Again, if you're having any questions, throw them in the question room and I will try and answer them as we go. And let me just share the PowerPoint and we'll start doing the wrap up. Okay, so what are some of our clients telling us are the benefits of using P6-QA? Well, the key benefit is really how empowering this becomes, okay? So some of our clients, they tag team who coordinates with the contractor on the critiques, on the schedule critiques. So some of our clients, they critique schedules many schedules every week or every 2 weeks in their program. So they're getting updates regularly. Now, to critique those, they don't only use their scheduling team. Their scheduling team is small. It's 2 or 3 people. And when you're getting 50 schedules every week to critique, you need to source that out to a broader team. So they empower their project coordinators and their project engineers to pre-review the schedules using QA, and then they can jump in and get the schedulers to help when there's some obvious gap. Okay, so this is the first thing, is you can empower a larger audience to do the critiquing, which means you can do it faster and you can bring up problems faster with the contractor. Okay, so the standards can come up much quicker and you don't have to rely on your seniors and your consultants as readily. So the key thing is the quality comes up and it becomes a very consistent, repeatable, standard approach to looking at schedules. It's not so subjective, it's much more objective. You can also critique very large schedules much, much quicker. Okay, so this is actually one of the clients I worked with, where it was a small developer in Manhattan doing a pencil building, 80 stories, 70 stories tall, very expensive project. And they did not have any schedulers on their team. So we were helping them critique the contractor's schedule. So I ran the analysis with QA on a 8,000 activity project. In less than 2 hours, I could tell that there was no proper critical path. There was tons of constraints. There were lots of missing logic, and very, very quick, so very inexpensive, gave the feedback so that they could immediately tell the contractor this schedule is not viable. Okay, so very, very quick. And, I was really dropped in on the deep end, having to do this, and we were successful at bringing very good feedback very, very quickly. So those are really the key things that we're finding with QA. And as more and more contractors start to use it, they're improving their ability to meet the requests of their clients. Okay, so that's another big thing that's QA is bringing to the table. Okay, so right now I don't see any questions. If you have any, go ahead, put them in, and I will address them. So I do want to thank you for spending the last hour with us. Hopefully you saw something of interest that may be valuable for your team. Absolutely reach out if there is something that you want to understand. You might have a special criteria and you're not sure whether we could accommodate it. But as I said, we've accommodated many, many special criteria. So certainly I don't see any potential gaps, but throw them at us. Let's see. Please go visit our webinar schedule because we have many tools. So we've got the reporter tool I've mentioned. We just did those webinars, so we'll run those in the next few weeks again. We've got our P6 scrubber tool, which lets you clean up XCRs, XMLs, and Microsoft project files so you don't pollute your P6. We've got our P6 loader tool, which lets you load data in and out, just about every data element in and out of P6 via Excel. We've got updating tools, both our taps and caps, and lots of clients use P6 loader for updating as well. We've got our auditor tool. So if you're in a large group and sometimes you have the problem with things being deleted, moved, and it's frustrating for you, take a look at our auditor tool because that one can be very handy. We also have tools for Unifier, contract management, AConnect, so definitely reach out, explore what other options we might have to help your team. Okay, so I've got some info here. I don't actually have my phone number because Sue sometimes does this webinar with me, and I've got Donna's number in the Philippines in there. But my email is nicolej@emerald-associates.com. You can reach out that way as well. So I'll stay on for another minute, but certainly if you do want to have follow-up with us, go ahead and put it in this poll, and that way we'll know how to follow up with you best. And if you do want to stay on and ask some questions, I'll stay on. I'll stop the recording here.